I'm welcoming you all to our third quarter webinar, and we are going to be diving into QuickBooks and your church. Long story short, I used to be a big believer in church financial software. I liked it, and I got to know it. But one of the downsides to church, church software that's made just for churches is in any community, you're lucky to find one person who has experience with it. So, I mean, maybe in Sioux Falls or Fargo or larger ones, Bismarck, you might find 3. But think about how many people that have experience with QuickBooks. I mean, in almost any size of community, you're going to find more than a handful of people that have experience with QuickBooks or Quicken. And so that's why I'm presenting it, not necessarily to push you to replace your church accounting software if you like it and you like where you're at, but at least to give you an opportunity to think about it, and then how to make it a little bit more church friendly. Because Sheri, you've used QuickBooks for years, right? So
correct. But also, Jeff, I just wanted to put this out there too, is that when I was helping at a church at one point, we switched from one church software to another church software. And you're right, they're not as easy to use or user friendly. And if you're comfortable with it, then everybody should keep theirs. But if you want to try to find something that's a little bit easier to use, then I have found over the years that QuickBooks is one of the friendliest.
Yeah. And there are differences. So one of the things, just housekeeping item, we are recording this, so it'll go out later. So if you want to share it with somebody, so if you're a pastor that wants to share it with your finance team or your treasurer or something like that, that's fine. And also, if you have questions, we'll be trying to check the chat. We're not always going to be 100% good at that. As you can even see, when Marty's came up, I was just, your brain has to all of a sudden turn a different level. So what we're going to be doing, just to show you the agenda, first of all, acquisition and setting. So if you want to get QuickBooks, I want to show you a cheaper way, or if you got QuickBooks, but you think it's a little spendy, I'll show you the cheapest way of getting QuickBooks. And then those settings that'll help make it a little bit more church friendly. Next one, donors and donations. And this is where Sheri's specialty really kicks in as working with the foundation. But how do you set up QuickBooks to handle donors? That's sometimes a drawback that people see, that they don't realize that QuickBooks can be a donor management system. And then the third one, we're going to look at budgets and reporting. It seems like QuickBooks also being for mainly designed for small businesses, right? Small and medium-sized businesses that are focused on, if you make a profit, they don't necessarily focus on a budget, which churches oftentimes, we focus a lot on a budget and we don't care about a profit, but we probably should. So anyway, all right, that's our agenda, and let's go ahead and get going. So acquisition and setting. So for a lot of our church accounting software, it's not uncommon for that to run $800 a year, if you're getting the full suite. Sometimes, and that's what I've experienced. Even if you're going through QuickBooks, some people don't realize that there's a cheap way to get QuickBooks. If you're a church, a 501c3 or a foundation, I suppose, you can go to TechSoup.org, and this is a huge difference. So I just looked this up last week, and you can get QuickBooks online, or for $75 a year, $75 a year for the plus version, which is the second highest version, I think it is. Or you can go to QuickBooks Online, QuickBooks' website, and get it for $80 a month. They'll give you 3 months at half price, but really it's $80 a month. So I mean, that's a huge difference right there. So $75 a year. That makes it cheaper than almost any accounting software you can get. It's almost cheaper than if you did your own accounting software in Excel. So anyway, just a word of advice. If you do go through TechSoup, though, it's kind of a rigorous process because it's people donating to it, and they want to make sure you're a 501c3, and your conference treasurer should be able to help you with that. So to go to, I think it's umgrouprulings.org or something like that, and get your proof that you're a 501c3, and then do some other work too. So anyway, just want to leave that out there. So what I set up my own fake church in QuickBooks just to make sure I was going through this and learning at the same time you are. And so one of the things that you do is in that first initial setup, if you select what industry you're in, the religious organizations, and then there's another box too in that initial setup, and you select nonprofit organizations, one of the things that'll do is that'll kick in a little bit for QuickBooks Online to customize some things for you. So it might help you in a little bit in this process is to go ahead and select QuickBook religious organizations and then nonprofit organizations. Sheri, if I'm ever talking too much too, just interrupt. So
well, the only thing I was going to say there, Jeff, is that if any of you tried QuickBooks before, I'd say 5 years ago, and I'm not real sure that that's when it kicked into the full amount, but or full-blown nonprofit, but they have really worked over the years to get that nonprofit service industry component. So Jeff will talk a little bit on some of the language we have to use that's different, but.
So, all right, it's being recorded now. Thank you, Marty. All right. The next one, the big one, I think the next biggest thing after you get that first initial setup is how do we handle these designated gifts, those donor restricted gifts? And, you know, for me, I like to handle mine according to generally accepted accounting practices, but for a church, you probably can bend these. And one of the ways I like to do it is, or probably prefer to do it, is to just have them run it right through the equity section. So the equity section's in the balance sheet. So that way, when you get a donation to, like here, you see the building fund or, the building fund or the youth fund or anything like that, you can see the balance there. That's all you end up seeing is that the revenue goes in there and you see the balance go up, and then expenses go out and you see the balance go down. You won't see all how much income we brought in. That your treasurer would have to pull that information separately, but that's really the number one way I like to do it. So because it's the least complicated, and that way you could easily say, because that's a lot of times the question we have, what is the balance in the building fund? What is the balance of the youth fund? I never, sometimes you get, how much do we spend in the youth fund? Well, but most of the time you get, what is the balance?
Correct.
Option 2A, and that's to run it through the other income part, your other revenue part of your budget. So you want to put it in your chart of accounts. When you set up stuff in the other revenue or other expenses part, it shows up below the operating income. So you still can get a true general fund operating income and loss. And one of the things I want to stress too here is that you want to use that child-parent relationship in you setting up your chart of accounts. So that way you get these subtotals. So that way you can see, oh, building fund, we got X number of donations and we got X number of expenses. And this is the balance for the year. This is the way actually we run our books in the Dakotas United Methodist Foundation and Minnesota United Methodist Foundation, because that way you see all the activity. But the cruddy part is you still got to set up this other side. You still got to set up the equity side, because at the end of the year, you got to balance those revenues and expenses and then record the ending balance over here. And so it ends up being a little bit complicated. It's technically correct though. So when your journal entry is, so let's just say, for example, we spent an extra $6,250 out of our building fund, and we had $525 extra revenue over income in our youth fund, and our mission of the month had extra, and then everything balances out to that retained earnings. You will always have a retained earnings. And so all your operating income and non-operating income and expenses, all of that closes out to retained earnings. So at the end of the year, whatever your net income and loss is, that is added or subtracted from your retained earnings. So this is how you would adjust for that then. The one that I'm really considering changing to, even for the foundation, even though it's not technically correct, is option 2B. And here it's very similar to what I had before, except I have these entries these beginning balance entries. So these are set up as other revenue accounts, but the thing is, so you're going to always have to do an adjustment. If you get a regular audit, you're always going to have to do an adjustment. But what happens is I would record the beginning balance for that fund that would normally be in the equity section and would go right here. And what it does in your report then is this. So this would be your statement of activities or your profit and loss. And you can see the beginning balance, which would normally be on the balance sheet, plus your donations, minus your expenses, and you can easily see what's in that building fund. So it's almost the best of both worlds in that you get to see the balance, you get to see all the activity, but it's technically not correct. But most of us don't get a CPA audit, and even if you did, you can explain why you did it this way. So, and
because
so again,
Jeff said so. Is that the reason, Jeff?
Yeah, because Jeff said so. Show him this webinar. Okay, I'm going to back up here in just a second. I just want to explain the beginning, how we'd set the balances again. So you saw my ending balance would have been 15,000. So at the beginning of the year, I would credit that, as well as any balance, whatever the balance is, the youth fund and the mission of the month fund. And again, it all hits against retained earnings again. So we had a question from, where are the child classes listed? So in option one, so here what I do is I do have a parent-child relationship. Let me see if I can get my highlighter. So here's actually my parent right here in donor restricted. And then these ones here that are indented are my donor restricted. And sometimes I might have separate ones of these. So like I might have trustees funds, I might have missions funds, I might have memorials, some of those kinds of things. That way they all, again, it'll all give you subtotals. But that's where I have the parent-child relationship going on here. So, and then again, yeah. How do you find these on QuickBooks? I've never seen these layouts before. So what I am is on the chart of accounts. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to hope for the best. I'm going to switch over to QuickBooks. Hopefully everybody sees my QuickBooks on here. So when you go to your chart of accounts, which is under accounting, chart of accounts, this is, I think, one of the most important things. We once did a webinar on this, but I mean, it's so critical how you set these up. So you can see here is where it's listed, and you can see the small indents here. That shows the parent-child relationship here. And then you could also see how they're set up. Sometimes, too, they give you extra columns that you might not need, so you could always adjust that here, too. But and even for my expenses, so I got my SPRC, pastor, all their stuff that deals with that, secretary, all their stuff that deals with that, and again, it all rolls up. So that part of it makes you think of when you set up your chart of accounts, it really affects your reporting. So if I wanted to hide the detail on the compensation, it just had the total for the pastor and just the total for the secretary, I could do that. You know, same deal with trustees. If there's a church expense, building expenses versus parsonage expenses versus insurance and all that other kind of stuff, that's kind of how I have stuff set up here. And I didn't set this church all the way up because they're an imaginary church. So, but that's where I go for that. And when I did the initial setup, you know, there was normally the profit and loss. That's where it changed that to the statement of activities. Instead of, it's normally shows up by default as profit and loss. So it shows up as statement of activities and statement of financial position instead of balance sheet. So, all right, hopefully that helped. And now we should be back to the screen here. And I'm going to zoom ahead, go on forward. So one of the things I want to say too is, I just briefly showed this, but you could set up your reports and customize them and filter them. So let's just say, for example, you wanted to show this would be, building fund would probably be under the trustees, right? So you would you might have the trustees budget, and then underneath that, just this building fund, and save it. And this would be the trustees report. And it would be real quick and easy, and it would solve a lot of, and once you save it, and we'll show that later, then it's so much easier to reproduce, because it's right there and ready to go. How do you change the reports from chart of account instead of P&L? From chart of account. Okay, so how do I change it? We will address that in the reporting section. So we will show that in the reporting section. So Patricia, we will, and I actually show it in the video. So, all right, donors and donations. Why is this important, Sheri?
The donors and donations is probably, Jeff and I'll tug of war on this, because I say this is the most important, and of course he thinks the setup is the most important, and I think we're both right, but it's that you have the right people doing each one of those. But knowing your donors and knowing who are your biggest givers to the church is so important, and knowing that the possibility of gifts and donations is also very, very important. The thing that you have to remember with the donors is that is a spiritual gift. If they have the resources to be able to give to your church, that's one of the spiritual gifts. And Jeff's going to go through some of this, and then I'll talk more about why it's important to know the donors and know everybody who's contributing to your church, but how you decide who you should and who you shouldn't make more contacts with.
And Sheri's right. I think chart of accounts and stuff like that is great for the backbone of it. But if you want to do the connecting part, which church is all about connection. So one of the things you're going to notice, even though I did set this up as a nonprofit, as a religious organization, you are going to see donors, which is nice, but you're going to see products and services. Really? I mean, that's really pledges, and so that's interesting. And donate and funds. We'll look at that a little closer. Pledges, I guess, is pledges, but products and services is really what fund they could donate to, how they can designate their fund, I guess. So.
Yeah, think of it as the services or the ministries available. So really products and services should be ministries. So if it's operational, if it's the missions, if it's children's, it's the ministries, the products and services is.
Yeah, which you would want them to see that they could. And so what I did here, and this is another quick, I think it's a quick video type of thing. Is it? No. Anyway, so this is, I already have a few set up. And what I want to do is go ahead and show you how to set up more. So you saw I have mission of the month, and I have youth fund, I have other designated, because you always need something, an other account. So anyway, but let's go ahead and show how to set one up. So again, we're in products and services. And if you go to new, I always set it up as service. I don't know why, but that's just the way I do it.
That's where it should be. That's where it should be, Jeff. Yeah.
Good. And then let's go ahead and do noisy offering, because a lot of churches might have a noisy offering, and usually this might be recorded to an anonymous donor, but you can do a category if you want, but I don't have anything set up. But here in my description, maybe I just want to put a reminder here that noisy offering goes to my youth fund, because I don't have a children's ministry one set up. And then here is the important one. This is where it ties in with your chart of accounts. So where do I want this exactly posted? And so if I'm running it all through my equity, I want it to go to that youth fund one. So it'll just hit the balance sheet. It'll just show the balance. So here you can go ahead and see, there's my description, my sales description. Again, they're not using really nonprofit language always. They are halfway in between. And then I have my other designated accounts. And then I have a couple of ones for the general fund. I have pledges and then just general fund donations. And the next one that we need to look at is our donors. And I have a couple of us donors set up at your favorite United Methodist Church. Sheri and I are both set up. One of the things too is there's this donor type there. And I don't know if that shows up always by default. There's that little gear over there that that you might need to do to make sure you see that. Donor type might be helpful in a lot of ways. So you might want to use it to say this is a member or a constituent, or maybe it was just a guest or a friend of the church or something like that. But that might be a different way, or even prioritizing. You know, maybe you want to have your leaders set up separately, just so that you make sure you're connecting with them. You know, again, with this $75 a month, you're getting 5 users can access it. So you could set somebody up with very limited access, or just being able to help your pastor, even if you're recording it for them and they're not getting into the system, you can do it that way too. You can help them. So donor type, that was that button here. I better point it out. Donor type, that was right up here. That button, when you click that, you can see these are the ones I set up: level 1, 2, 3, and 4. And Sheri has made it to the top as a level 1. Hey, Marcia found out you can get it for $50 a year. So that is even better.
Ooh,
so
wonderful.
Cool.
Let me talk, Jeff, just a minute on the donor types. It's important to and I don't want to say level, but that's kind of what it is, and do the stair steps of where your donors are at. Are they large givers? Are they consistent? Are they more service oriented? You want that in there as well, that they have other spiritual gifts and where they serve in the church. All of those pieces will begin to make sense on how you connect with the people within the church, of how they give in their activity. And so you can rename these levels. Can't you, Jeff? I think you can rename those levels.
You can totally, if you hit edit, you can call it whatever. And I as an accountant, I didn't know what to do.
No. So he left it as he should, because he's an accountant. But the things that your church, and what's important to you in your church, then you will level those. That's called moves management, when you move one from one level to up to another level. And I'm going to touch on that just for a second, but just for a little commercial here, our next webinar is going to be on donor and donor relationships, to show how important it is to know the people that are in your church, not just for the money, but for their involvement, and then how they can give and share their resources with your church.
Because not everybody really wants or should get the same message. You know, if you got people that are heavily invested, is what I normally like to call them, are engaged, you know, they probably want different communications. And you could use this as a communication system. There's a way to just select level 1 donors, or whatever you want to call it, you know, core donors, something like that. And those people might get different ones than if you're a one-time giver and you just come by when you're in town, you know, something like that. That's a completely different communication that they might get. So
I think here's a good time to also mention, Jeff, that it is very important for your pastor, the CEO of your organization, so the pastor, to know your giving, who the givers are in your church. And I know that's a controversy that has been talked about and re-talked about for years, but it is so important that they know, because if giving goes down by an individual, 90% of the time, there's something else going on in that person's life that probably should have a pastoral call. And then it's also a way for for you as a pastor in church leadership to know who you should be talking to and hearing their opinions about what's going on in the church, and how they feel about some of the things that are happening. So it's very important for the pastor to work with his leadership team, and it doesn't have to be amounts, but it is important to know who the top givers are and those who are struggling.
Yeah, and we had, I mean, a couple pastors kind of got their system down where, you know, alert me whenever there's a new donor. Alert me when somebody signs up for electronic giving. Alert me when somebody makes a big jump in their giving, because they're like, or the opposite too. I mean, a lot of times there's a story behind that. And
Right.
so excellent. So I'm going to walk through just real quick on setting somebody up, and Kelsey is going to be a donor. So anyway, I just set up a bunch of her information here. We could put her, if we wanted to make her a child of one of
She
ours.
can be
we
my
could,
daughter. She
that
can
would
be
be
my
awesome.
daughter.
So
I know, right?
this is all pretty standard, but then you go to the notes, and this might be a good place. Again, I could just imagine, I mean, if you're a church of any size, to have a place to keep notes. This might work if you don't have anything else. So I say Kelsey's an up and comer. And then the other one that I would just want to show is, here's where you do those donor types, you know, level 1, 2, and 3. So I'm putting Kelsey at a level 2. So she's, I don't know why, but anyway, that's where you would do that. So the notes, I really haven't played around with that too much in QuickBooks, but I'm assuming it's useful. So yeah.
The notes are very useful, Jeff. There's probably one of my biggest downfalls as the director of the foundation is that I don't go into our notes in our database enough. I try to go off of memory, which needs to be less and less. But any of those type of notes that gives you more information about the person. You learn about them. How many children do they have? Are they on a farm, or are they in city? Have they been with the church for how many years? All of those things to go in those notes. One, for you to be able to have a better idea on who your donors are, and two, when church leadership changes and when pastoral appointments change, that information is in there for forever, so you can build on it and not have to starting over every time.
That's cool. Marcia makes the comment, they don't show up automatically, you have to go in purposefully. So that's a good note, good comment. The next thing I'm going to do is show you how to set up a pledge. And again, you go to pledges and it shows up as invoice number 1. So again, a little bit of that tension. Eventually, I suppose this will get straightened out. But I set up Sheri, and I'm also assuming, I've never done this before, but I'm assuming you can, if you don't already have an electronic giving system, I think you could probably do at least pledges through QuickBooks. I don't think you could do other types of giving, you know, non-pledge giving through QuickBooks necessarily, but that I'm not totally for sure. So one of the things I did was I set up Sheri. I didn't want to, I actually would check this, send later, because I don't know what the communication is going to do. You got to look at the form first. But anyway, you look at your pledge date. So this is her pledge for 2021. So the start of the pledge is January 1 and the due date is December 31. And then I just plugged in $12,000 because $1,000 a month sounds good to me. So, and there is a way then to remind people on pledges, but sometimes you got to go into the form settings to make sure it doesn't have any, make sure there's not any language that might be like you're past due on your pledge. You know, you don't want to do that, but you might want to do a friendly reminder. So
Yeah.
Sheri, hey, thank you again for your pledge. But, you know, but anyway, it's a way to track it then as well.
Right.
Yeah, you can't change much on the pledges. You can change a little bit on the invoice. You can do custom emails through it, but statements, I would a pickle of a time doing statements through this too. But the statements, you will be able to do them. They're just not going to be super, they'll work for IRS purposes, but you're going to have to put another letter with it. So, but then I can go ahead and I can see the pledge here. So, I mean, if you click on your open pledges, you'd be able to see all the open pledges that you have. You can see the balance of 12,000, the total of 12,000, when it's due, the time it's set up. And then when you receive a payment from Sheri, you could just click on that receive a payment. And it'll go ahead and go to Sheri. Her information will be put in. You'd have to do the payment method here. It goes automatically to undeposited funds, but you put in the amount and it'll show that already that it's going to the pledge. So $1,000 is what she paid, because that's what I got you set up for, $1,000 a month. So, so then it shows up, you can see the pledge payment, and then you can go ahead and see at the very bottom there, you can see that amount, the balance going down to 11,000 to 12,000. Status partial is what it's at. But then a lot of your, I guess, probably a lot of your giving is non-pledged gifts, non-pledged donations. And so there you got to go to new transactions and receipt. And again, it shows up as sales receipt. So that's just the way it is. But I decided to make a donation, and I gave 20 bucks in cash, and I put it in an envelope, and I told them to split it between the mission of the month and the general fund. So that's what I decided to do. And then I just entered in a couple extra ones. So Kelsey gave $50. And then also part of Sheri's check also was another $50, I think was for the mission of the month. I don't recall exactly what it was. But so once you get all those entered in, so you probably have a counter sheet and you enter all this in, then you go ahead and you go over to your new transactions over on the side, and you can go to your bank deposit, and then you'll see all of them that were listed in that you entered in there. You can see them all. And so here you can see I have some check and some cash, and I could select. So the ACH one probably came in differently from the other deposits. So when I want to match it up, a lot of times I tie my bank account right electronically to the QuickBooks. It makes it easier. So I just check the ones that were cash and check, and then I would go ahead and select that as a deposit, and then I go back in and do the $50 ones next. We got another question. Jay, how do you set up the credit card giving system? Is it connected through your church web system? How much does it cost? So long story short, I have no idea about QuickBooks, but we do use Vanco, and we use some other different ones. We have experience with those. I still recommend Vanco. I think, I mean, they're probably not the best, but they're the most familiar with the Methodist system. They're competitive price-wise and everything else. Vanco is, they're just solid. And what you end up doing is you contact them. All of our Methodist churches are already set up with them pretty much. So they just have to get your banking information. What they do is they give you a link, Vanco, yes. So I'm going to go ahead and Kelsey, would you be able to put the link, go to Vanco, do Vanco and then UMC, and then there'll be a link there that'll give them right to there, or Sheri. But Vanco.
That's cute, Jeff, that you thought I could find that link and put it
I
on
know.
there. Yeah.
Kelsey.
Let's rely on Kelsey, should we?
Yeah. So that then they will give you this link, and then depending on what your web system is, either you could put a link out there, or even if you're posting it on Facebook or something like that, and it'll be a web page that they can go to. It'll divert you to a web page. And once you're also set up there in Vanco, there's this Give Plus app, Give Plus. I'll just do Give Plus. That's what the app is. And any Methodist church that is set up there, they can you can find it and it'll look at by your location, and you can give that way as well. So the other one is the stuff we're discussing is we are looking primarily at QuickBooks Online, but this is very similar to QuickBooks Desktop. You know, if you have the current version, there's going to be some differences. A lot of the feel, Sheri can tell probably a little bit more. So.
Jeff, just as a couple of comments have come up about it not being as easy to change some of the things that you were talking about in some of the different fields. Check what version you have of your QuickBooks, because it has become much easier, and the language that they're using is much friendlier to nonprofits. And that has just come within the last couple versions.
Yeah.
There's more options. So you might have to upgrade your version and maybe do the online version.
Yeah, and there is, yeah, that's something too. The online one, it's steadily being improved, and same with the desktop versions. But we are looking at the online version just because, just for one thing, is a lot of times church computers are crappy. I mean, we tend to buy one and then assume it'll last a decade, and I think it's almost more secure to have it online, where this has what is it, they call it double authentication or something like that, where basically you have to know the password and then they'll text you and then you have to get in that way. So it's fairly
after
secure.
a certain amount of time. Yeah, after a certain amount of time.
If you do remember, yeah. But
Yeah.
for the most part, somebody's not going to be able to hack into your system. They're not going to be able to sign on in a different computer without your cell phone. So
yeah, that connects with the IP address, I think, of the systems that you're using.
All right, budgets.
Jeff, just a couple things.
Oh,
I just want to go over that, and then I know we're running late here, and we want to be sensitive to everybody's time. I can't stress enough that, and we've seen this happen. You know, some of you that I've been out to your churches or visited with you over the phone, is that we've seen a number of things happen over the years of working on these, but some people become very transactional on this and on the QuickBooks, and you get all excited that it's all set up and that it's all going well and the reports are great. If you don't take it to that next transformational step and work with the people that you have input and tracked, then it just becomes another transactional point to have reports and to have lots of great reporting at your meetings. I'm trying to think of the other word, but lots of great reporting. Once you start to use this tool for transformation, you will see it in a whole different way, and there will be more opportunity to increase and grow your ministries because it becomes a ministry tool. So. And that whole piece, like I said before, on all of this and working with donors and how to do that next step will be our next webinar in November.
Excellent. We will try to get wrapped up here in the next 15 minutes. So great questions, by the way. This is going to be recorded and you could reach out to us too after this. So we're probably not going to get to everybody's, but budgets and reports. This was one of the most frustrating thing with a lot of for-profit software. I mean, whatever I use, it seems like it's tough to find the budget. I mean, for a church accounting software, it's almost like one of the second main budget. I mean, we want to know the deposits and the bills, and then maybe the budget is probably the third one. Well, in QuickBooks, they hide it under the gear, under tools, and 2/3 of the way down is budgeting. And it's not even a great tool. One thing I like to do is I like to do monthly budgeting. And again, if you already had it set up once, you can copy it over, by the way, to take out some of the work, but it's worth going through and do a monthly budget. So, and here's what I mean. So I got my accounting. This is just the first setup one. And then when I go to the next one, you'll see that for income, for example, let me get my highlighter out. So, I mean, although I got 100,000 for income, I'm going to expect that most of that's going to come, almost half of that is going to come September through December. And then the rest of it's maybe sparse. And maybe that's just my church. Every church is going to be different. Some of your churches grow during the summer. Some of them shrink during the summer. So it depends on which lake you're next to, I guess, or whatever. And then a lot of your stuff is probably going to be divided by 12 because it's either insignificant or that's just the way it is. Like salary, for example, is divided by 12. But you're going to have insurance and other things that are going to be a little bit more. But the one to pay attention to most, I think, is your actual giving, by the way, because so often I see churches that will budget 1/12 for everyone. And then, of course, they feel like they're losing when they get deep into the summer because it's unrealistic. So you want to set that as realistic. So that way you got a better feel for how you're actually doing. You're going to set up your finance committee and your church board to make better decisions, knowing that maybe we're really not as bad a shape, or maybe we really are. But either way, if you're just dividing by 12, they really don't know. So the other thing I think is kind of a pain, and I'm going to show you how to get to the budget report, because the budget report is crappy. I don't even know. That's probably not even the right word. That's way too soft of a word for how poor their budget report is. And I'll show you how to rename it and how to set it. So under the business overview, there's a budget to actual, and you can see that by default, it's an unreadable report. I mean, I don't know how many that's like 50 columns wide. 50 columns wide. And then it also includes my non-operating stuff, which I don't want to include in the budget report because I don't budget the building fund. First thing to do is I like to set it up to this year to last month. That way we're just looking through the last closed month. And then what I like to do is I go ahead and switch it to totals. So that way it'll trim down all those months worth. And then the other thing I like to do is I like to filter it as well. I only want to see the operating income, operating revenue, and operating expenses. So I'm going to click this button, all revenue and expenditures. That gets rid of the other revenue and other expenditures. So you can see there, I got rid of the building fund. And then I'm going to pause it right there real quick if I can. Well, maybe I can't because I'm not that smart. Anyway, that's how you rename the, I'm not going to be able to back that up, sorry. That's how you rename it, is you just click on it, or it's also when you go to the customization and then hit the save customization. Once you get it like you want it, save it. And then I like to package them together. So if I got my reports together, I got a good budget versus actuals, again, I just had to click up. So there's my reports. I'm going to go to customize reports, and there's my budget report right there. And if I have a bunch of my balance sheet, my statement of activities, or my statement of financial position, that's where you rename them. That's where you go through them. And again, here's also where you could go ahead and, like I said, if you get your chart of accounts set up right, that's where you can also start hiding some of the details that maybe your whole board doesn't need to see. Your finance committee might need to see it all. Your trustees might need to see all their part. Sometimes your board doesn't need to see how many copies, what it costs for copies or anything like that. That was really kind of quick. Sorry about that, but it was quick. And again, it'll be recorded, but it's worth it to customize them, get them how you like them, get them how your board will like them. That's also very important. Get them how they need to see the information, and then save it. Save it so you don't always have to recreate it. And then you can go in there and again, change the titles, change that kind of stuff, and put them in your customized reports. All right.
Well, as you take a breath there, Jeff, I just want to say also, we can help you with this, but the other piece is that we can help you understand that these budgets could be set up on focusing on the ministries too, and less focus on the number of reams of paper that you are using, like Jeff had mentioned earlier. Boards don't necessarily, should not need that, and committee members, but how are you using the dollars that you have to put it back into ministry and focus on those areas instead of the paper clips. I always use the word paper clips, counting the paper clips.
Because you should be able to tell what's important to your church by looking at their budget, is what I assume. Mm-hmm. So, and again, I call this missions instead, which I would assume that, and it's the second one. So my staff is very important to me. My missions are very important, is what I would assume that says to a person that was looking at it. And it looks like it's, hopefully it's generously funded. I don't know. So mm-hmm. Anyway, all right. The donor reports are, again, it's going to be this mix and mash of for-profit and nonprofit language. On the On the one side, you're going to see, pledges and receive payments. That's probably a good one for somebody to look through every now and then. Make sure nobody's dropping off, whether it's quarterly, probably quarterly at least, double checking that. And then, so that's under the who owes you. So again, not necessarily the most, religious organization type of nonprofit wording of it. But anyway, and then the sales and customers too. There's also some good reports there, and you're going to have to kind of play around and look through them. But yeah, anyway, you'll find some that are useful for you, but a lot of them really aren't that useful. But there's about like 3 or 4 that are really good there.
Mm-hmm.
The last one I want to show you is how to actually run that statement. So when you're doing the giving statements, and again, I probably wouldn't use it to just email it out, because they're just going to get something that doesn't look that great. I would want to put a letter with it, because I'd want to probably put, a little bit of wording about it. This is what happened this last quarter, thanks to your giving. Thank you, but very much. And and this is what we're looking forward to. And by the way, for IRS guidelines, we got to say that no goods or services were received except for intangible or religious something services. I think I have the exact wording somewhere out there. But here, let me just show you how to run a statement. So if you go to invoicing and donors, you can see here's my donors, and I can click them all, and I can go to create statements, or you can see right below there was the option to just email them. So then for my statement date, I want to go through the first 7 months and go ahead and hit apply. And you see, I could just email them right here if I wanted to, but I really don't want to. And let me just go ahead and go to the preview, print and preview. And donors that don't have any activity, they won't show up here, because you can see the statement. It'll work for IRS purposes because they need to see the amount and the date. So especially if they're larger donors like Sheri is, but they need to see the amount and the date. But if they, and then there's a place to go to see more of the details too as well. So if you want to see like the details of what people did give to, I think that's under reports and under the sales and customers. And there's this one, sales by donor detail. And again, I'll do this year to last month and run the report. And now I can see, I can see what everybody gave to over that course of time. By the way, just to show you this, you could click on that gear and get rid of all those columns that you don't want. So there's a lot of these ones, sales price, quantity, that really don't make sense. And then I'll click that, and now it's a little bit cleaner. And you can see up there too, I could export this to Excel too if I wanted to play around with it a little more. But anyway, that gives you a nice clean report to do. So yeah, so again, I would probably just print out those statements and then send them separately with a letter. So, all right, I think that's it.
Well, thank you everybody for attending tonight. And we had a lot of information in this amount of time, and we will send a link to the recording. And as always, you can contact our offices and we'd be glad to walk you through some of the steps to be able to help you set up, or if you want to see new reporting in your QuickBooks that's already set up, we'd be glad to do that as well. Our next webinar is November
8th
at 7 p.m. And like I said, don't know the title exactly, but it's going to be on donor relationships and building that relationship and helping to understand how individuals with resources is their spiritual gifts, and how do we work with those in the same way we do with volunteers.
Yeah. And thank you very much for taking your time to spend with us. You know, we do this, we want to see our churches and foundations prosper, and we want to see them put that money into mission. And that's really the heart of this. Is we think there's nothing greater than the United Methodist Church and what it can do in this world. So,
Right.
all right.
Thanks, everybody. See you in November.
See ya.